Besides the thousands more barrels of oil that spewed into the Gulf of Mexico today, there are two other new developments to report in the BP Ultra disaster in the Gulf. First, the attempt to cover the gusher with a smaller containment dome, the thing they're calling a top hat. That did not happen. BP reportedly had concerns that ice crystals might form inside that thing, the same way they formed inside the larger containment dome when that effort failed a few days ago. BP is instead preparing to insert a narrow pipe right into the spot where the oil is gushing, hoping to be able to siphon the crude up to the surface and into a tanker. The riser pipe that's gushing is reportedly about 21 inches in diameter. This siphon is reportedly about 6 inches in diameter. The smaller tube, according to the AP, would be surrounded by a stopper of some sort to keep oil from leaking around it once it was stuck into that riser pipe. So that was the first development, the new plan for what to try to do a mile under the surface of the water. The other development today happened in Washington, where 2 days of hearings this week on the oil disaster showed us exactly what the oil industry means when they say safe, when they keep assuring us that offshore drilling in deep water is so safe now. The big blowout preventer that didn't work in 2001, a Transocean report showed that there could be as many as 260 failure possibilities in that piece of equipment. That's supposed to be the fail-safe if all else fails, remember, and it's got 260 different possible fail points. The blowout preventer's hydraulic system did fail, meaning that it was physically incapable of doing its job, which was crimping off the pipe that's spewing oil. The blowout preventer also has a dead man switch that's supposed to operate if other systems fail. That dead man switch was hooked up to a dead battery. The engineering diagrams of this blowout preventer that they consulted to try to figure out how to activate it with those robot subs, remember, after it failed? The diagrams they were consulting were completely out of date. The thing had been modified so much it didn't look anything like the plans that they were consulting to figure out how to work on it. One of the cement plugs on the rig was also found to be missing. The rig failed pipe pressure testing, which should have indicated that something was going wrong with gas in the drill line. Failure after failure after failure, blown supposed failsafe after blown supposed failsafe after blown supposed failsafe. And 11 people lost their lives. And the Gulf, every day, gallon by crude gallon, is losing maybe everything. But don't worry, remember they said it would all be fine. It would be safe.
I think we should remember that scientific knowledge is always moving forward, and actually using the best available and the most up-to-date scientific information is part of the current regulatory system, and it supports the OCS leasing and exploration and development programs. I think we also need to remember that OCS development has been going on for the last 50 years, and it has been going on in a way that is both safe and protective of the environment.
BP's Vice President of Gulf of Mexico Exploration speaking last year, giving chest-thumping assurances about how safe and protective of the environment it is to drill, like the Deepwater horizon, into the outer continental shelf. Today, the 6 senators from California, Oregon, and the state of Washington called for a ban on all oil drilling off the entire west coast of the United States. But wait, didn't BP say it would be safe? Joining us now is Washington Democratic Senator Maria Cantwell, who joined with 5 other Pacific Coast senators today to announce that legislation that would permanently ban offshore drilling off the coasts of Washington, Oregon, and California. Senator Cantwell, thank you for being on the show tonight.
Good evening, Rachel. So
President Obama, as I understand it, put a moratorium on West Coast drilling until 2017, 7 years from now. What would your proposed ban do differently?
Well, we want a permanent ban. Why have oil drilling off our coast be prohibited just when Barack Obama's president? We see now how dangerous this can be in the Gulf of Mexico and how important it is to protect the pristine shorelines of Washington and California and Oregon. These are vital economies, and we don't need to keep drilling for oil.
When the political pressure created by this oil disaster in the Gulf is over, the political pressure on the other side will resume to, for lack of a better phrase, drill, baby, drill. Do you think that this incident has permanently damaged the credibility of people who are in favor of offshore drilling in terms of their assurances about the safety of this technology?
Well, the United States only has 2% of the world's oil reserves. And so the notion that we are going to affect gasoline prices or affect what we're going to do in the future as a world oil supply, we're not. And so I think when you take that into consideration and you take into consideration the catastrophe and the economic damage that could reach $14 billion, you have to say to yourself, it's time to start migrating off of oil and onto other sources of energy.
Is there West Coast drilling now? Is there West Coast drilling that's already happening? And if so, what would your proposed ban do to that? Well,
there is drilling off the coast, the West Coast. And in my state, mostly the proposal is to continue to explore and do mapping and doing inventory for the future. That is at the taxpayer's expense. Now, if you don't want to drill off the coast of Washington, why do you want to spend millions of taxpayers' dollars actually doing the mapping and the inventory? Off of California's coast, there is exploration today. In fact, the governor, just after this incident happened, pulled back from a proposal that was to open up a large area and generate revenues to the state. But he has decided, yes, this is too big of a risk.
Senator, the Kerry Lieberman bill, the climate bill that was introduced yesterday, would allow states to opt out of offshore drilling, anything within 75 miles of their coastline. Your proposed ban, of course, would prohibit it on the West Coast categorically. How do you expect the Senate to work out the conflict between those two proposals?
Well, you had 6 senators today from the West Coast who said we're having none of it. We don't want to expand. We basically want to have a clean energy future. And we think that the economies with fishing, with tourism, with the other industries that exist there, are natural resources that have become, heritage sites. We don't want to see that economy ruined by the fact that we would go after so little amount of oil. To say nothing of the fact that the royalties that are supposed to be paid by these companies nowhere meet what they really should be meeting for the American taxpayer.
One last question for you about the politics of all this, and I will confess that it might just be me not getting it, but the Beltway common wisdom is that the oil disaster in the Gulf actually makes it less likely that we'll pass a climate bill this year. And I just don't understand that common wisdom, but I recognize that is the common wisdom. Do you believe that's the case? Do you think a bill can pass?
Well, Rachel, I've seen your show enough to know that you usually do get it right and you do your homework. And the issue here is not if, it's a matter of when. We know that oil is going to continue to skyrocket up, and there's not enough resource there, and the United States can't do anything to impact the world oil supply. Now we have a very visual, damaging situation that we know that the risk is far greater than anybody ever realized. And so I think my colleagues are going to look at those events and say there's got to be a better path forward. Now, I can't say what day or what week that's going to happen, but I know that this is going to be something that is going to be helpful to my colleagues in saying there's got to be a better path forward for the U.S. economy and to preserve those other economic, tourism and fishing that are so vital to the U.S.
Senator Maria Cantwell, Democrat of Washington State, thank you so much for your time tonight. It's nice of you to be here with us on the program. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel.